Well, I think this IGN review sums it up. Unfortunately, Nickelodeon's new animated series based on the TMNT franchise fails to live up to the source material or its potential. The series is bogged down by an overly cartoony style. Instead of the dramatic, edgy heroes of the comics, we get a group of preteens. Oh wait, I lied. This is actually a review from 2003 about Cartoon Network's new Teen Titans cartoon. And, as we all know, this review is right. Teen Titans definitely isn't widely beloved, definitely didn't receive critical acclaim, definitely never covered serious themes, definitely didn't draw new fans to the franchise, and definitely wasn't popular enough that the network was able to launch an entire spin-off series that targeted a slightly younger audience. I'm being facetious. Teen Titans did all of those things. And Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles could have done all of those things too, if Viacom, CBS, and Nickelodeon hadn't been cowards. Part 1. Timeline. In July of 2016, soon-to-be co-creators Ant Ward and Andy Suriano made their pitches for the next TMNT incarnation at the invitation of Nickelodeon Studios.
Hey, it's Ant Ward
and Andy Suriano,
co-executive producers of Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on Nickelodeon.
Both had done work on the current series that had premiered in 2012, Ant being a supervising producer and Andy doing consumer products art.
They'd been developing a new version of the Turtles since the 2012 version was wrapping up. Then suddenly there was a quick conversation with us individually asking, hey, what's your guys' take?
We both had a very, very similar narrow gauge of what we were interested in doing with the franchise.
Without even talking to each other. With creating this, we want to keep it fresh. We want to pay homage to what's come before, but also go places maybe we haven't gone before, stretch ourselves artistically.
They completely reimagined TMNT taking place in a New York City that's full of magic, under which lies the Hidden City, a mystical realm full of supernatural creatures called yokai that are distinct from mutants. Inspired partly by European comics and graphic novels, anime, and Batman 66. The series was greenlit for a first season of 26 episodes, though that wouldn't be publicly announced until the following year. The pre-production, like the writing and the storyboards, would be done at Burbank at Nick Animation, and the bulk of the animation process was outsourced to Flying Bark, an Australian animation studio. The voice work and post-production would also be done in Burbank.
In darkness we find our fate! I'll change key willy-nilly. I see you're probably finding that out about me.
Also in 2016, Nickelodeon's parent company, CBS, began the long process of undergoing a merger to rejoin Viacom and become its current iteration, Viacom-CBS, which now owns the largest market share of American television. The 2012 series ended the following year in 2017. When the concept art and new direction were finally announced in February 2018, featuring all 4 turtles as different species with magic weapons, and, most damning of all, Raph as the leader instead of Leo, there was some pushback from some fans, but there was plenty of interest as well. And also people were really weird about April being black. During SDCC in July 2018, a couple months before the full premiere of the pilot, Nick released a sneak peek of the show, along with the cast and crew.
So we have here, Josh Brenner is voicing Donatello, right over there. Omar Miller, Mr. Raphael. Brandon Michael Smith, Michelangelo.
The CEO.
Ben Schwartz is Leonardo. And Kat Graham is voicing their wonderful, amazing sidekick, April O'Neil. There was a...
Sidekick?
Right, I mean, she's more, I mean...
The turtles are her sidekick.
Of note was the fact that Rob Paulsen, voice of Raph in the 1987 series and Donnie in the 2012 series, was going to be the voice director for the series. Splinter would be voiced by Eric Bauza, who played Tiger Claw in the previous incarnation. Celebrity appearances in the voice cast included Lena Headey of Game of Thrones fame and John Cena of John Cena fame as the show's primary antagonists, Big Mama and Baron Draxum. Following this, the pilot, Mystic Mayhem, and the first short episodes, including Origami Tsunami, Donnie's Gifts, War and Pizza, Newsworthy, and Repo Mantis, were released to YouTube for everyone to watch. Once again, there were various responses to the new content. Some praised the artwork while not fully connecting with the new direction, but it really clicked for some people, and a dedicated fanbase sprung up right away. Later that same month in July 2018, a week or two after the sneak peek, the show was greenlit for a second season, which began production soon after. But, one fateful day in August 2018, nostalgia critic, cursed be his name, released a video reviewing the first several episodes of the show. This video crystallized all past criticism and shaped most bad faith criticism after.
But in terms of the personality, there's little to no difference. Because they're all exactly alike. The show is taking a very similar route as Teen Titans Go.
These became rallying cries for detractors of the show, whether they had seen it or not.
I'm sorry, can I have a moment?
The show premiered in September of 2018 on the main Nickelodeon channel to mixed reviews, some positive, some negative, but the backlash from some fans was ongoing, mostly about the tone and the new version of Splinter. However, there were plenty of people that loved it, and the fan base continued to grow.
Really? Nothing? No puns? No chill out, bruh? No ice to meet ya?
Hey, let's try and keep this professional, okay?
Toys for the series were incredibly hard to find from the get-go, usually shoved in some forgotten corner of Best Buy or Target, and they were few and far between. There were a few action figures, many of which were bafflingly hideous, some party sets, some children's tees, but not much else. In February of 2019, a feature-length film based on the series was announced, a collaboration between Nick and Netflix. As the first season went on, the series became increasingly harder and harder to find. If you didn't have cable or closely follow its irregular airing schedule, your only other hope was to find it on obscure streaming services or just buy it. While the show had established a strong fan base of adults since the beginning of its run, many of whom were industry professionals or hopefuls, and many of whom ended up working on the show themselves, they were a minority, and the target audience, actual children, just weren't able to view the show by and large. Not long after the first season finished airing, the show was moved to Nicktoons from the main channel, and in February 2020, it was removed from international airing schedules. In light of this, and considering the lack of marketing around the show, fans started to question whether the series was cancelled. But since all verifiable information from the studio indicated that the series was ongoing, and namely that the promised 26-episode second season and the movie had never been publicly reneged upon, spreading these rumors was discouraged within the fandom at large.
Get thee back to the netherworld, fiend! It's working! And I don't even know what it's plugged into!
The second season of the show premiered in April 2020 and was met with excitement from fans, a growing group that had continued to use unconventional means to find and watch the show.
Ah, a moral quandary. Do we give the antidote to the villain, or...
Then, in the final days of July 2020, when the show was squarely in the middle of its promised 26-episode run, the titles for the next week's episodes dropped as usual. However, these were all titled Finale. Once again, rumors started to circulate that the show was cancelled, but these were once again shut down in favor of relying on official sources. Fans speculated whether this was because the show was about to reboot to being called TMNT, ditching the word rise to parallel the growth of its characters into fully fledged ninjas, or whether it was a joke since the creators and crew, who were by and large pretty active on Twitter and social media, had yet to say anything otherwise. Preview images and GIFs posted by the crew, some of the only marketing that the show got by the way, were far more alarming and numerous than usual. Even then, the episodes were being called an event or a special, rather than an actual finale. However, as the days counted down towards August 7th, an increasing number of the crew and production staff they didn't announce anything exactly, but started tweeting more and more about how they were going to miss working on the show and things like that. The writing was on the wall, but no one wanted to read it. Most people didn't come to terms with it until the day before the episodes aired. But yes, it seemed like the episode titles were probably accurate. On August 7th, about 2 weeks ago today, the episodes finally dropped. And where before the show had been progressing at its usual pace, these 4 episodes were, quite literally, an entire season and a half's worth of development in 44 minutes. Immediately afterward on Twitter, some creators began to come clean. The show had been put on quote-unquote hard pause in September of 2019. The crew can't say anything about this, but I have Google, so I can confirm that this would have been right after Viacom and CBS officially announced their merger was underway in August of 2019. As writer Russ Carney stated on Twitter, quote, "When the show was greenlit, there were different people running the studio, and whenever there's a change of guards, the next batch of elites want to make their mark, and that often means killing other stuff." Unquote. It's transpired as recently of June of 2020, this year, that Seth Rogen is making a CG animated TMNT movie in partnership with Nick, but the crew weren't told this when the show was put on pause. In fact, the crew doesn't seem to have been told much at all about why the show was paused, but one possible reason is that the current leadership was unhappy with toy sales, which is kind of to be expected considering that the toys were extremely difficult to find, whereas the previous leadership under which the show had been greenlit only cared about ratings. which are pretty difficult to get if your show is made extremely difficult to watch. Basically, from the moment that Viacom and CBS began their merger in September of 2016, only a couple of months after the show was greenlit, the show was in a no-win situation before it ever had a chance to air. The crew were then told to drop all development that they had completed for their fully planned season 2 and instead to write the 4 finale episodes in a span of 6 weeks, averaging about 1 script from first draft to record draft per week. And for context, it usually took double that time to undergo that process for even 1 script. And so with 4 episodes that were equally as well made as the others, but with none of the accompanying fanfare, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles died, leaving the crew suddenly out of work in what would soon be a pandemic, with Nick still, to this day, not bothering to announce that the show has ended. Part 2. The show. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick balanced overview of the show and the criticisms that it gets, but this is also the part where I admit that I'm a biased human being and that I'm very salty about the way that things turned out here. First, I'm just going to say it's good. It has incredible industry-setting standards of animation and visuals. It has a really good, compelling through-line story and a lot of character development and a lot of really cool, actual, well-seated plot twists, and the world building is also really, really cool. I'm a sucker for combining sci-fi and magic, and they do that so well. The music is boppin'. Just gonna say the music is boppin'. Nick, please drop the OST, I'm begging you. I don't think I've ever watched a show that consistently made me laugh and didn't make me cringe, like especially comedies. And it's just fun. I would definitely compare it to TMNT 87 and Batman 66. You can tell that the creators are having fun and the cast is having fun and everyone's just kind of enjoying themselves. It does have some more serious moments at times and like actual scary, intense moments, so that's really cool, and obviously that's all carried out really well through the writing and the visual style. It doesn't get bogged down in a lot of the stuff that superhero media tends to get bogged down in, and I think that that's really neat. Alright, so time to address some specific criticisms that the show has gotten. I'm going to be honest and say that a lot of these came from a place of bad faith or resistance to change, and I don't really have anything to say to that. If that's you, then like, live your life. But I'm really tired of the show being compared to Teen Titans Go. That's part of why I included that bit in the beginning. Rise isn't Teen Titans Go. Rise is Teen Titans. Teen Titans was the first major break from the established canon and had a completely different target audience and a completely different look and feel that was very bright, targeted towards preteens. And it ended up being really, really good, changing the source material that it was based on. It's a lot of people's favorite versions, and it brought in a lot of new fans. Teen Titans Go doesn't compare to Rise because Rise is revolutionary and groundbreaking the way that Teen Titans was. First, I want to talk about the visual style. Their visual style is very angular and a lot of hard lines. It's very fast-paced, but I don't think that it can really be argued that it's not like objectively a feat of artistry. The action animation is so amazing, and I can't stress that enough, and I'm sure that you picked that up. I would love to show my favorite action scenes, but I actually can't do that because this show is really good, and it pairs all of its really important plot moments and developments with like the best fight scenes, and so I can't really show those to you because I don't want to spoil anyone, but just know that with every major plot development you can expect an absolutely banging action sequence. And that's on God. If you want to see some of the best stuff that the show has to offer, you'll just have to watch it yourself. The backgrounds are gorgeous, and you can really see their similarities to certain anime and the French comics that inspired the creators. It's all like very bright colors, very detailed backgrounds, and they're honestly a joy to look at. Even if you don't watch the show, just go and look up some of the backgrounds for it because they're just really pretty. So about the tone, again, not every show is going to be for everyone, and that's fine. I'm going to stress again that the show is for children, and so complaining that it isn't edgy enough is definitely a strange take. And that's not to say that it doesn't have scary moments and challenging themes and actual points to make. It's just that the creators were intentionally balancing comedy with action, and some people just aren't used to that. It's fine. Something else that really drives the tone is also going to be the world building. The setting has a really unique aesthetic. Like I said before, supernatural and folkloric elements and sci-fi elements coexist seamlessly in this world, sometimes becoming difficult to tell apart. Also, Rise tends to rely on soft world building versus hard world building. In hard world building, the audience is directly told about the world, whereas on the other hand, soft world building makes use of imagined detail. Gaps that are placed strategically throughout the story in order to encourage the viewers to imagine what's going on beyond what's being directly shown. Basically, hard world building relies on telling, whereas soft world building relies on showing, usually over a long period of time. Some people complained about not knowing enough about the world fast enough, but it takes time. The heroes of Rise occupy this weird liminal space in their own setting where they're both special and not special because there's way weirder stuff out there than them.
A table. What do we do?
Okay, be cool. I think we just sit at it and ask for stuff.
Like regular people?
I think here we are regular.
And instead of the usual strategy of kind of building up to the weird stuff, Rise starts and it's like pedal to the metal from day one, and like the viewer isn't going to understand everything about that world from the first handful of episodes, and that's the whole point of that kind of world building where you get curious and you want to know more. So as far as the plot, it's worth mentioning that the series was originally conceived as a bunch of standalone stories and that a studio mandate pushed them to incorporate an overarching story, but I think that they do it better than most shows that I've seen. They do a really good job of seeding future developments in really, really early episodes. And there's also just a lot of really genuinely cool plot twists in it. My next point is personalities, aka I watched my first and only Nostalgia Critic video to make this point, and I will be bitter about it for the rest of my life.
Their looks are fine as long as it matches their personality traits, like Michelangelo.
You must be this rad to ride that ride.
The party dude, Leonardo.
Oh yeah!
The party dude, Raphael.
Cannonball!
The party dude, and Donatello, the machine guy. Note also a party dude.
Based on our velocity and entry angle, I concur.
Well, at least April is there to act as...
Who has crushed it? Give me 5 or 3.
a party dude?
Imagine claiming that characters all have the same personality for daring to express joy. Something really funny that he does is he complains about how these two villains that show up in the beginning of the story...
The two henchmen turn into bug aliens riding their dogs as steeds. And the action just kind of starts without knowing what these two guys' personalities are.
We don't get their full backstory, like, immediately. Like, the turtles get attacked by these guys, and he's like,
look at them! Don't you want to know more about these two weirdos?
And then later, when they go to the hidden city and they spend 10 seconds explaining to the viewer that they are in a magical hidden city, he complains that there is exposition.
They find April, they hug, and then they immediately just talk about where they are.
And we're in a mystic hidden city, deep under New York.
It's the relationships that's the heart of the show.
So I'm going to be deadly honest here. It feels terrible to say, but he does have some points. I love the pilot, but honestly, those few episodes that they released to YouTube are not my favorite to rewatch, especially War and Pizza and Newsworthy. Like, I always skip them. And I think that there's some validity to the criticism that the storytelling priorities are on things other than the specific differences between the characters as opposed to introducing them as a family unit, which, again, is kind of a theme of the show, but you know what, it's fine. Retroactively, it's really easy to identify specific lines the characters say and go, oh, that's their personality, that makes sense.
So, you guys from Jersey?
A few hours ago, I would have called this foolish and impossible. Now I just call it foolish.
When you're watching it the first time, I understand how someone might not be able to distinguish them because it's so different from what they're used to. It's fair. Fine. You got me there. Like, a lot of good shows have jank in the beginning, and this show has some jank. If you struggle to connect with the first few episodes because of that, I get it. However, this does not erase the cardinal sin of being a man who talks about media on YouTube and yet seems to be fundamentally incapable of engaging with it. My favorite example of this is when they're in a lab and there's like this teleporting dog that saves them, and he's like,
and the Muppet Minion teleports everyone out, making you wonder why he didn't just teleport out before.
But like, multiple times earlier in the scene, it's shown through clear visual language that the dog thing can't escape because of the force field around it. And then in the shot before the one he shows in the video, you see the force field get broken, and then the dog thing immediately teleports them out. And it's like, to me, it really calls into question the validity of his other claims because, like, he's either so deeply unobservant as to not comprehend a scene designed for children, or he's just lying. Also, to return to Nostalgia Critic's point about the world building not being explained, we do eventually learn more about those two guys in the pilot that Nostalgia Critic was curious about, but we don't learn those things just in the first couple of episodes, and that's not a mistake, it's a deliberate choice. I could do an entire video about this video and just going point by point and arguing about it, but honestly, I don't want to waste my precious time on this earth thinking about him for one more second, so I'm not going to. Anyway, to properly respond to the point about their personalities being the same, in this version I'm going to remind you it is a comedy, and they are all very silly, but I think that the person who thinks that Ninja Turtle men should not be silly has some thinking to do. The hill I'm going to die on in this life is that silliness and seriousness are not mutually exclusive, but that's just me. One thing that struck me about their personalities when I watched this show for the first time was how these characters actually felt like teens, which is something that I think a lot of children's media often struggles to get right. It feels like the writers really understand kids, both as a general concept and modern teens in specific. Also, I can't believe this is the first incarnation to put the turtles in hoodies. Also, while I think I've been pretty fair about pointing out places where the show could be criticized, I think it's also worth acknowledging that most people use the same personality criticism in bad faith because they don't like the show and they want an objective seeming reason to dislike it. This criticism really isn't sustained after the pilot because one of the first episodes of the show and one of the episodes that was released to YouTube has an entire section devoted to their individual characteristics.
Mikey, where's your legendary optimism? Raph, where's your go-getter attitude? And Donnie, where's your thing, your emotionless passion?
Here.
So to do a quick rundown of the characters. So we have Mikey.
Yay, arts and crafts!
Upgraded from either being a witless punching bag, or comic relief, or just a frat party bro. And he's now free to be a sensitive, observant, optimistic, sunshine child artist type that's treated with respect.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Feelings. Welcome to my seminar. Hug it out.
And he's a little unhinged.
Dr. Feelings? I thought you were Dr. Delicate Touch.
Dr. Delicate Touch feels nothing.
Donnie is no longer a sweetheart nerd who just babbles in senseless science words all the time.
2 data points? You're hypothesizing with 2 data points? Scoff!
Well, I mean, he is that, but like with the addition of being a fully unhinged mad scientist theater kid with a god complex.
Science is king, and I shall prove it through a scientific combination of biology and physics that I call song!
April is finally a character.
Oh, you gonna wish you were a ghost, Gumbus!
And not a MacGuffin like she is in pretty much every other version. Or sometimes it seems like the only reason that she's there is because she has magical powers related to their destiny or something, and it's like, okay. But this April actually has a personality and agency.
Looks like another typical April O'Neil failure.
April, you are not...
Although, I did rescue you.
Yes,
And I did take out a troop of lethal little girls.
See? This is
And I got myself free with a walnut. A walnut!
I love her. Leo.
Sorry, Danton, I gotta win. Tried losing once, wasn't for me. Win at all costs. Boom!
Now that he doesn't have his entire personality consumed with being the leader, he gets to finally do something else, which in this case is being a hubris-riddled trickster.
So, Leo, how does this loss feel?
A better question would be, did I really lose?
And, in keeping with older versions, has a pathological need for acceptance.
You know, it really helped me if you guys said that I was your champion.
Just open it!
You're a champion.
Can't relate. And Raph
The Red Angel of Preventing Harm saves the day!
is now free of angsting about not being the leader, so now he gets to be a go-getter, jock, protective older brother, which is so nice.
Whoa! Whose brother you calling a pipsqueak, towhead? Maybe you're the pipsqueak. I'll protect you, Mikey!
This child is so big.
Don't worry, I'm the big brother, the one who is the biggest.
I'm going to cover Raph and Leo more in just a second. Hang on. We have to talk about Splinter.
We can be heroes like Lujitsu.
Nice try.
Yeah, he's kind of a jerk at the beginning, but that isn't a flaw, it's a feature. It's the whole point is that he has a flaw that he needs to overcome because he has an arc, which happens in stories sometimes where things happen in them and then the characters are different after the arc happens. Also, like, the creator specifically wanted him to be closer to his kids in this version and to be more of a actual parent figure rather than a distant sensei. And so the kids will actually call him Papa or Dad, Daddy-o, a bunch of different varieties on that. But the point is that all of the kids, including April, all have their own dynamics with him and interactions with him. He's arguably the character with the biggest, most noticeable arc in the entire series because he changes so much and you learn so much about him, and it's really fun to see him grow and mature into someone that's truly lovable. And I'm not ashamed to admit that this version of Splinter lives in my brain rent-free forever. It's just so nice that he's allowed to be silly and gross instead of upholding the sort of like traditionalist, authoritarian, wise old man stereotype that feels vaguely orientalist and has always gotten on my nerves. So maybe that's just a me thing, but I do really love it because the key difference about this Splinter is that he's a hedonist. Like, yeah, he's still got some wisdom. He's got some mad ninja skills. He's got his tragic backstory or whatever, but he's just a full hedonist. He just likes to have a good time. And same. If you would like to see a really good character study on Splinter and Leo and their similarities in Rise and also how they relate to all the other past versions of TMNT, I would really recommend checking out Jade the Stone's video on that subject. So we have to talk about the leader thing, apparently.
Give it back! Gee, a fight between Leo and Raph? Oh, I didn't see that coming.
Every other version has this rivalry. I like to watch other versions and then clock exactly how many seconds it takes for them to fall back on using that as a conflict for the characters, and it's usually the first scene that the turtles are in, and it usually is under like 5 minutes. And when that happens, it just means that poor beta cuck Mikey and Donnie have to watch this happen from the sidelines while Leo and Raph fight to be the big alpha boy, while Splinter doesn't do anything about it, if not make it worse, because apparently there does have to be a leader, as if they're in the military and not literal children. And so in Rise, Raph is the leader in the sense that eldest siblings are the leader, which is that they aren't really, they're in charge because they're the oldest, but like their siblings don't really have to listen to them and everyone just kind of does whatever. And that feels way more authentic to me as someone who has some siblings. Taking away the leader element has done nothing but help the series because it means the characters are free to do other things. And like, sure, I mean, I love some like Richard III type. I wanted to be the big in-charge boy drama as much as anybody else, but I love not seeing it also. It's especially interesting that when this trait is moved around, I think that they honestly preserve a lot of the character's core traits. Like, for example, Leo in his past iterations wants Splinter's approval really, really bad, which is why he's such a goody two-shoes, straight-laced, lawful good boy. Rise Leo does not have a leader role to aspire to, and so his method of coping with his constant need for approval from other people is by seeking attention and getting approval from literally anyone that he can, and it's really funny. And to like expand on freeing the characters from stuff that was a little bit constricting, Raph in previous versions is pretty much entirely eaten up by the angst of not being the biggest boy. And so now he is very big. I mean, most importantly, it seems like in past versions his defining trait is being angry. And I know that like anger is a real thing that happens, but making that someone's only allowed emotion is a little bit tiring. It's really nice to see Raph where he's able to be himself, and that's not to say that he's not experiencing stress from trying to take care of younger brothers.
Don't eat that.
Oh, yeah, gross. It's been on the floor.
And it's poison!
How about some pizza puffs?
Stop eating the poison!
Other reviews were able to pick up on this even from the first couple of episodes, is that Raph is great at, like, protecting people physically, but isn't very good at thinking of plans.
So, all we need to do is figure out what the Twilight Realm is, where it is, how to get there, how to get out, how to use the weapon, and probably some other stuff.
Whereas Leo is very good at thinking of plans.
Please, this was my plan all along.
And so they argue about that, but it never reaches the, like, Richard III Hamlet kind of level of sibling rivalry, and more is just a sibling squabble that doesn't matter because they're siblings and they love and trust each other.
Trust me.
I do.
Imagine. Really quickly, I want to cover some stuff that I think sets Rise apart, not only from past iterations of TMNT, but also just from a lot of boys' children's media in general. The first is the accessibility of the crew, both in terms of being able to just talk to them and in terms of being able to actually be on the crew. Flying Bark hired a lot of freelancers, which, while that's maybe not great for, like, having a sustainable living situation, it does significantly change things in terms of the fan experience. Because if you really like this show and you really like the visuals, then you can just go and ask the creators about it. There's a good chance that they'll reply with, like, storyboards or animatics or little anecdotes about when they were drawing it. And it's just really neat. Also, it was really, really cool to see that the crew and the cast and basically everyone working on the show really cared about making it good and treated fans with kindness and respect. The next thing that I think sets the show apart is deliberate attempts at just general wholesomeness. The boys are allowed to cry, like, a lot. Like, this graph is outdated, but it documents how many times each of the boys cries up until, I think, the middle of season 2 or something like that. And it's a lot. They cry a lot. And, like, they'll cry a lot as a gag, but there's also a lot of times that they do cry for real, out of joy or out of sadness. And man, if this graph included the finale, it would be so many more times. Even the gags about crying feel pretty good. Like, they're not a joke because, like, oh, look at this loser who dares to cry, and more like, don't you just know the feeling of crying with joy when you eat a really good sandwich? It's like, yeah, I do. And it's never mocked as something to be ashamed of. These superhero ninja boys cry way more than a lot of characters in children's media, especially media for boys, and I think it's neat. Another thing that I want to categorize under wholesomeness is the deliberate effort to hire a lot of women and minorities to fill out the side characters and things like that. I'll be the first to admit that something like this doesn't necessarily mean that the show is actually progressive or any good, but it's definitely not a bad thing, and I think that Rise is good and is progressive in the ways that actually matter, so I would say that this definitely is a point in their favor. Speaking of minorities, the entire main cast are all voiced by minorities, either Jewish or Black, and while, again, that doesn't mean that the show is good, it definitely adds a layer of authenticity to a story that is about social outcasts who would be treated poorly if they were discovered. And the actors are good. They're well cast and their performances are always great. And as the show went on, the writers started catering more and more to the actors' strengths, which made the characters feel much more textured, which is really cool. And it's just nice. Also, there's a lot of characters of color and they are actually played by actors of color, which is a low bar to clear, but they do it, so points for that. I think that more than anything else, what sets it apart and what I like the most about it is that it prioritizes family and love and empathy over all of the plot and the fighting and the ninja stuff. The creators consciously chose to focus on the family element over every other storytelling consideration, and it shows. In past versions, to my knowledge, big shows of affection were reserved for extremely dramatic moments, which is fine, that's a storytelling style, but in Rise, love is something that is a feature of their everyday lives.
Thanks for believing in me, Donnie. Leo, I love you. As for you, Raph, you get last game. Mikey out.
They'll enjoy spending time together.
Well, there is this one thing, but I haven't tested it yet, so...
Tests are easy. It's answers that are hard.
I love you so much, let's do it!
And like, no one is ever mocked for showing affection.
And now, you owe us...
Hugs! Hugs! Hugs!
It's happening!
Hugs!
Okay, you have earned
Again, that's something that doesn't happen that often in boys media. I'm going to say that this is the most important part of the show to me. I grew up with TMNT like a lot of people did, and to me, the thing that drew me to the series wasn't really the ninja stuff, and it was definitely about the idea of a family doing stuff together. More than anything, that's what Rise is about. Part 3. What now? If you're watching this and you haven't seen Rise, or you saw some of it, but then you gave up on it because you didn't jive with the first few episodes, I really hope that this video has convinced you to give it a shot. It's been my quarantine emotional support, and I really recommend it for that. It really is just like a funny, wholesome, fun, beautiful show with a lot of really short episodes, so you can watch a bunch of them without losing your attention span because my brain is broken. Also, if you're interested in 2D animation or artistry, I would highly recommend watching the show for that reason, because you're going to see some really amazing fight scenes, and I hope that you at least like tune in for those. I really can't stress enough that Nick and Viacom CBS have made fools of themselves. First of all, the treatment of the crew is pretty abysmal, and while that's really not unusual because creatives aren't usually treated very well by networks, I don't think that just because it's really common that we should just lie down and take it. It sucks, and it's fair to say that. Honestly, the animation in Season 2 is so good, and considering that for a lot of the production of Season 2, people knew that the show was being put on pause and treated poorly, and they still decided to flex so hard, feels like such a passive-aggressive dig. Second, I truly believe in my heart that if Nick had not been a coward and had continued airing Rise on its main channels where the target audience could actually see it, that they would have had a hit on their hands at least as big as Teen Titans, because the show is just good. And the show wasn't for the people that hated it. It was for children who, as far as I know, did nothing but like it. So that's their fault. The thing that really gets me about this whole situation is that it's not like the show had artistic merit but just wasn't making money and so it got killed. There were tons of fans willing to fork over money for this show. They really could have made so much money from this show. They could have made so much money off of me personally. Like, if they had sold some nice plushes or some adult-sized t-shirts or like a Jujitsu pinup calendar or a Jackson body pillow, it would have made so much money off of me. I think that it's really tempting to blame Nostalgia Critic and his ilk for what happened to this show, but honestly, that doesn't matter because the show wasn't for them and it was for children, and blame still lays at the studio's feet because as annoying as their bad faith criticism was and is, they were not the target audience and no one had to listen to them, but here we are. Also, I just want to say that although fans obviously aren't really entitled to anything, especially considering that most of the fans of this show aren't even in the target demographic, it really sucked that no one was ever told what happened to this show. Canceling the show without telling literally anyone and apparently forbidding the crew from telling anyone so that you wouldn't have to get complaints is a bold move. Finally, it just really sucks that something that is this well made and unique got treated this way. It's really depressing. Anyway, overall, this is a really bad look. Nick, and especially by extension Viacom CBS, have embarrassed themselves in front of everyone. And their actions will not age well. Like, the movie is still happening and it's going to come out in a year or so from now, but that kind of feels like hollow comfort when we can see the episodes that we could have had and they looked really dope. And I guess those just aren't going to get made. Since the finale, the crew has started discussing all of the episodes for season 2 that they had planned, some of which had fully written scripts that got scrapped. And some of those episodes sounded so cool. Mikey suddenly being the oldest and having to like take care of his now younger brothers. Or one that's just called Shred Dead Redemption, which like... Or an episode that featured Baba Yaga, just Baba Yaga. I'd watch that, but I won't because it got canceled and we'll never get to see it. It's fine. At the time of writing, Rise fans are organizing on Twitter to try and get the series some attention, either by getting Nick to renew it or by getting Netflix to pick it up, since Netflix also recently did that with another Nickelodeon canceled show, Glitch Text, that had really good animation. The tag has done some trending, and it seems like we're getting a little bit of traction from Netflix, but honestly not a lot, so it's very possible that there's nothing to be done and that this show is dead, and that I am going to have to just rewatch the same season and a half until the day I die. All jokes aside, I think that co-creator Andy Siriano is right. He posted this long post on his Instagram. One of the things that he said that really stands out to me is that history will look kindly on Rise. And I agree. The love and artistry that the crew poured into this show will set it apart as time goes on. If somehow anyone who actually worked on Rise is watching this, thank you. Thank you for pouring so much love and effort and creative genius into this show, even when it was clear that the studio was doing everything in its power to hinder it. I'm grateful for every second I had with this show, and I'm sad to see it go. But I, for one, am not going to be forgetting about it anytime soon.